This is the Freeheel Life Podcast, episode number 20. I'm your host, Josh Madsen, coming at you from the Freeheel Life shop in Salt Lake City, Utah. And we made it to the 20th episode, and I am super psyched to be able to say that because I guess it's kind of a milestone. At least I've been able to stay consistent with it. So I appreciate all you out there that have been listening to the episodes and checking it out, sharing it with your friends, and helping us spread Telemark, as always, across the universe. So today I'm just going to be rolling solo, get a couple newsroom pieces out and notes. The first of which actually happened last night, and I'm actually recording this on Easter Sunday, and a lot of times I do these more ahead of time, but just kind of worked out to do it the night before it's coming out. So that kind of makes for being able to talk about something awesome that happened last night, and that was the video premiere of the King of the Heel video competition that was held by Telemark Colorado, which is an organization of some a couple guys out there that started it in Colorado and have put on events for locals in that area in Summit County, Eldora, and some of those other areas. But they came up with this idea to do this video contest where they came up with a rule book called King of the Heel, and each thing in the rule book, basically tricks and certain things that you could do, would give you certain points. And that basically was tallied up, and then creativity and all that, we're going to be able to vote on it. So anyways, the premiere happened last night. They did an awesome job. There was a couple little glitches, but I was telling them, no big deal. You know, things happen. And I was actually trying to help them out, do some Facebook testing to see if we could do this like premiere party thing. And we did it with an 8-minute video the week before, and CJ, the one guy, and from Telemark Colorado, and myself, we were like, yeah, that seems pretty cool. Let's do it. And then I kind of left them to their own devices, and they had like an hour and a half upload with all the different submissions. And it was a little tricky. Facebook wasn't working with for the watch party, but it finally went down. It was amazing. It made me so proud to be a Telemark skier. It's what I've always loved about our community. Especially seeing a lot of younger people putting these videos together from all over the place and just getting after it and having fun and being goofy and just doing it. And props to everybody that put a video into that. You can go right now to telemarkcolorado.com and you'll find King of the Heel. I think it's KOTH. On their website, there's like a little tab for it, and you can go vote. I think they even have something on the front page, so you can go and vote for your favorite one. So you can watch each one of those submissions and vote for your favorite one. So while you're sitting at home today or this week, I don't know when the voting closes. I forgot to look, but go check it out. You're going to love it. And I can't wait to see them do this again next year when we're all back on the slopes and have an opportunity to get out and do it. And put the new rule set out. So aside from that, another thing that came out last week, and the second episode is going to drop tomorrow, is a new series that we're doing called Dosty's View. And this is with my good friend Craig Dosty, who is, in my mind, and probably the mind of many other people, a Telemark legend. He's been around for many moons, and was the owner and operator of Coular magazine through the 80s, 90s, or at least 2000s, and started Telemark Skier magazine, was the original owner prior to me taking over that many years ago after Backcountry magazine bought it. So anyways, he is the guru of gear, in my opinion, and nobody breaks down Telemark gear as good as he does. So what we're doing is a weekly series on our YouTube channel. We're also putting it on our Facebook and our IGTV, so you can check it out there as well. But it's basically just, it's a short segment where he just kind of gets to sound off on Telemark gear, what he's tinkering around with, testing little things he's figured out to make the gear work better for us and him. And he's just sharing it, and it's just kind of off the cuff and super fun. So the first episode came out last week, Dosty's View, number 1. Number 2 is dropping tomorrow, Tuesday, and can't wait for you guys to check it out. Definitely, he'll be commenting back on the comments for sure on the YouTube channel, so you guys can check that out. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already a watcher there. The other thing I was going to mention, if you're a Facebook user, there is our amazing Facebook forum. You can access it through the Freeheel Life page or the Telemark Skier magazine page. And that's been really good. I think there's over like 4,000 Telemark skiers in there. There's been some really good talks lately. And we're definitely trying to figure out how to utilize that more. I think eventually we'd like to have it on our own site, because we know everyone doesn't use Facebook, and we realize that. But for right now, there are a lot of people on there, and it's a great place to kind of get your kicks during the week and trade videos and photos and conversations. So hopefully you can dig on that a little bit. So today's episode, I am calling the life cycle, not life hack, of a Telemark skier. And I was recently tagged online by another by someone. I think it was on the Freeheel Life Instagram. Someone had tagged our page, and there was another podcast that had come out claiming a crash course in telemark skiing. And to be clear, I am stoked when other people are talking about telemark skiing, because it's great for the sport. It's great for people knowing that it's out there. It's great that other people are trying it. And I have no qualms about that. But what I am not a fan of is when people use terms like crash course or life hack in this day and age. And to be fair, I didn't actually listen to this particular podcast. I'm sure it was great. But the crash course thing kind of got me thinking about sort of my philosophy about telemark and what I think some people often miss about what it is. And, you know, obviously this is one person's viewpoint on the whole thing, but, you know, I thought it was worth sharing for sure. It also reminded me about why telemark skiers get such a bad rap sometimes for being so passionate about the turn. I think we are the butt of so many jokes, and you know, it's I get it, you know. People can be annoying. Let's be real. But so what, you know? Wouldn't you rather be stoked on something that you're passionate about and want to share with others? That's always kind of been my philosophy, you know? And I think, you know, telemark is one of those things, like, you're passionate about it. And I usually feel like the haters are usually the ones that won't put the long, hard work in to learn the telemark turn. And that's cool. But I don't think it was meant for them. You know, and the people that gravitate to telemark they're generally the people that stick with it, I guess, you know, and I'm going to kind of talk about that in this kind of life cycle concept. Is the people that really stick with it are passionate individuals, usually in my experience of meeting them, and they're people that want to put the work in. And, I guess that's what kind of, it got me thinking about this whole crash course concept and life hacks. I mean, I literally hear that everywhere. You know, everything's about a life hack. It's about a business hack. It's about hacking your way through life. And here's my thought. If you're into life hacks, then the long haul of telemark skiing as a craft is probably not your cup of tea. Should you try it? 100%. Of course you should try it. I would love for you to try telemark skiing. In fact, you may even like it despite your thoughts going into it. And but I don't think you'll stick with it for the long haul as your go-to way of making turns. If you're someone who's just looking for hacks, if you're looking for just a way to take a shortcut to get to the end, and you're kind of missing the process of the whole thing. Because telemark skiing is one of those things. It's like a lot of things in life. It's sort of like the rough rock you toss in the river at the beginning, and you sort of let it tumble down for years and years and years down the river, and it just chips away at all the sharp edges, and eventually at the end you come out a nice smooth stone, but you got to tumble for a ways, figuratively and literally. And I guess that's just kind of what got me thinking about the whole life hack thing. It just, even if you're someone who's incredibly athletic and, you're just someone who can start any new athletic endeavor and you're going to be great at it, you're still not going to be amazing at telemark skiing right off the bat. There's so much to learn, and there's all these little zones that you can work on, and it's a lifelong journey, man. It's one of these cool things that the mastery of it is going to take you a lifetime. And for people that love stuff like that, it is a buffet. It is a feast where it's never ending, and you're just never going to get bored. There's always going to be something to work on, and there's always going to be something to enjoy. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, you guys, was sort of, it got me thinking about really the life cycle of a telemark skier, at least through my lens. And I think where this all begins, obviously, is if you're starting out as a new telemark skier, the first phase of this entire life cycle is you're a newbie. And there's a lot of forms of the noobs out there. And we see them come into the shop all the time, and you meet them on the hill. Side note, telemark skiers generally will always, I think I brought that up in one of the mailbag episodes, is if you see a newbie, go help them, and go ask them if they need any tips or if they want to take a run with you just so they can watch. That's how we pass this turn on to people, and the receptive ones are gonna pick up on it. They're gonna be psyched that we have that type of a community, and that's something that's always existed, and it's up to us to make sure that it always exists in the future, is to make sure that we're passing on this turn to the next generation of people that are interested in it. And I can't think of a better way to share it than to do that. So the different kinds of newbies, I was kind of trying to think, like, who are the people I see that are getting into telemark skiing? The first one is always, not always, but this is probably one of the more common ones. It's the older alpine skier, and they're bored. And older meaning maybe they've alpined their whole life. Maybe it's not an age thing as much as you're kind of bored. You're bored of making alpine turns, and you're kind of looking for the next thing. I've talked about, areas where there's smaller mountains too, like the Midwest of the United States, Midwest of Canada. There's places around the world where there's smaller hills, and telemark can definitely make those areas much more interesting as well. So, it could be that you're just bored. You're ready for something new. The next kind of newbie I see a lot of times too, and I guess as we're talking about newbies, this is almost another thing of like maybe thinking about when it's a good time to think about telemark as an option, about that's the way you want to start sliding down the hill. And the next one is snowboarders. that are bored. And I've always felt kind of this kindred spirit with the snowboard crowd. I think it was because partially I grew up skiing at Brighton here in Utah, which was always funny because I realized late, as I, started in my early 20s, as I started traveling around, people would ask, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. Oh, you must be an Alta skier because you're a telemarker. And I always thought that was kind of funny because I grew up skiing at Brighton and it was more of a snowboard crowd. And I didn't really know Little Cottonwood other than having skied there a few times at Snowbird and Alta. But I don't know. I think growing up in Salt Lake, I had most of my friends were snowboarders. I grew up hanging around Salty Peaks, which was a snowboard shop here. And I just always liked that vibe, even though I snowboarded a little bit back in the day, but, I always, especially the early history of snowboarding, in the 80s and into the early 90s, it just kind of had that rebel spirit that Telemark skiers, I think, have always had. And so I guess it's that kindred spirit. I always felt like the snowboarders were always cool to us, especially as, Telemark became quote unquote not as cool, maybe in the last 15 years. They're kind of, I don't know, there was sort of like an attitude shift. It used to be like snowboarders and skiers hated each other in the 90s. I feel like nowadays it's more like alpine skiers think we're stupid, like, why are you guys doing this telemark thing? You guys are ridiculous, So I feel like snowboarders have always been cool. And we see that, people start coming into the shop that are currently snowboarding, or maybe that's all they've done. They've never actually even skied. And that's worth noting too. I mean, I see that all the time. People that have been snowboarders that were not skiers, the first time they're stepping on two planks is as a telemark skier. I think that's incredibly important to mention, because you do not have to learn how to alpine ski in order to learn how to telemark. That is a myth. It's a myth in the evolution of thought somewhere along the line, that you've got to alpine ski and then you become a telemark skier. It's just not true. So, now with that said, as a new telemark skier, you're probably, to be a great telemark skier, you need to learn parallel technique, and, going back and starting at square one, if you need to, with pizza French fries, snowplow, parallel, learning a stem Christie, learning how to wait, learning how to turn. These are fundamentals of skiing. And telemarkers, to be a great telemarker, you also have to know when it's appropriate to throw that P-turn, which is the slang for the parallel turn, but we'll just call it a P-turn. I always like that better. But yeah, snowboarders coming in, and they definitely gravitate to that surfier feel and look. And once it clicks for snowboarders, I think we always say it's two toe side turns, just because of the way your body angulation is on the hill. It's a much more dramatic stance. If you were to say it's two toe side turns, it's almost more like snowboard racing or something like that. But yeah, we definitely see that. The next noob that we see a lot, and I never really realized this until we had the shop and started doing rentals, is new parents were a large portion of people coming in looking to telemark ski. And I thought that was so fascinating, because I never thought about that before. But as people are having kids and they're getting back on the slopes, they need something that one is kind of challenging, because they're obviously, they're skiing with their kids, they're teaching their kids how to ski. So when they can make some turns, they want it to count. And it goes back to having, you're on a smaller hill, you want to make it more interesting. That's a great option, to increase your difficulty without having to change the location, so to speak. And I'm sure it doesn't hurt to be able to kneel down and be able to walk around a little bit easier, just the mobility aspect of having a pair of Freeheel skis on to cruise around and help kids. But we see a lot of new parents. I always think that's a cool one to mention. It's a great time to learn how to telemark because you're probably stuck with like a 3 or 4 year old kid and you're not out shredding with your buddies. So, and the last one, on the flip side of that is, as a kid, being a new telemark skier is the perfect time to learn how to telemark. We here, I think this is probably worldwide. I mean, I can speak more for the United States, but I think that it has been drilled into our brains that telemark is something that you start later in life. You become an accomplished alpine skier and an intermediate to expert alpine skier, and then you learn how to telemark. And it's just not true. I've over the years have coached a couple kids programs here in Utah. Alta had one, and there was also one at the Canyons on the Park City side. This was probably 10, 15 years ago. Incredibly successful programs. And, honestly, the biggest deterrent for a young kid, and I'm talking like 8, 9, 10, we'll get in. I always say we'll get into doing some more videos. I'm sure a podcast is in order for just kids in general. Because there's misinformation or lack of information regarding kids. There's boots currently made that go down to Mondo 19, which is like a kid's 12 boot in plastic, not leather, super soft, and they flex great. And kids, they might make alpine turns, but what a great time. And this is what I saw teaching kids in these situations where there's actually a kid's program. A lot of the time they're lifting their heel up, they're learning how to drop a knee, but they're also learning how to make parallel turns. They're learning how to cruise around. They're learning the sensation of just being on skis where their heel is not attached. And it's not, when you learn in that kind of a scenario, I really truly don't believe it's taking away from your potential as a snow slider to get from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill and learn the techniques that you need to get to the bottom and efficiently. In fact, I think what it does is it just teaches you how to be more comfortable on the Freeheel equipment, and it lets you learn the telemark turn more naturally. And like I said, with the adults, you're going to probably, like a snowboarder going over to alpine at any age, or a snowboarder going to telemark at any age, you're going to have to learn all these techniques at once. And so why not learn pizza and French fries on telemark skis? So that's really the first part of this life cycle of being a telemark skier, is just one, I've said it before, I'll say it again, the people that are probably going to gravitate to telemark, in more cases than not, I truly think it's not a logical choice. It is a personality choice. And it's just a fact. I'm going to call it a fact. Just because everyone I've met, I just feel like the people that are incredibly passionate and are heading on this journey, aside from just trying it for one day kind of thing, they just have the right personality, and they're interested in doing the work, and doing the work for a long period of time because it intrigues them. And so I think as a community, it's incredibly important to have people around us that are psyched like we are about this. And honestly, I feel like more people quit. There's some people that they're passionate about telemark, but all their friends they hang out with are razzing them so much that there's like this weird peer pressure, and you finally just quit because people are like hassling you all the time. Don't listen to them. You have my permission. Please do not listen to him. If you love it as much as I do, stick with it because it only gets better. So that I think once you kind of get out of this newbie zone, you're just starting out. I mean, you're brand new, you know, you're just fresh. You're green. You haven't learned anything. You don't even know how to make the turn. You're trying to drop knees. You're trying to mimic what you're seeing. And once you kind of get out of that, you're into what I call the middle zone. And I think this is probably the most exciting part of the telemark journey so far. Being a new person, a greenhorn, so to speak, in telemark sucks. Okay? And, you know, out of all the people that start telemarking, I don't know what the percentage is, but for you to make it out of the newbie zone is an incredible accomplishment because most people are just going to quit. They are not going to put the work in. And they're just going to be like, this isn't fun. What's the point? But I guarantee you, if you're one of those people I'm talking about, you got the right personality, you like to work, you like to get after it, it's going to be awesome. And you're going to be like, this sucks so bad. I'm literally face planting the entire time. And guess what? You're going to love it. And you're going to get better and you're going to get to this middle zone a lot faster. And so that's why I say it's probably the most exciting part of the telemark journey is getting to this middle zone. I think the middle zone really starts when you link your first couple turns together. I feel like there's this moment where you link good turns too. I'm not talking like you're kind of doing like an alpine turn with your heel up and you're kind of doing two of those. I'm talking about like good stance, good technique, decent technique, you know, because you're a new person. But you're going telemark turn to telemark turn. You're not coming up in between. There's not this middle ground. And there is this beauty to connecting these two turns. And I feel like this is a conversation that I've had with people around the world when I've been traveling is you can like connect on this, literally this one moment in time where you're like, oh yeah, I remember that day. I remember that day when I connected those two turns. And once you feel that, once it clicks, there's no going back because all of a sudden this entirely new zone opens up to you where your brain is like, oh, I get it, you know? And the whole greenhorn phase, the noob phase, it's out the door because all of a sudden you're like, oh, that sucked so bad. This is why I'm here now. I understand. And it's just going to click. And I guarantee that'll happen to you. I can promise you there's going to be a moment where you're like, oh, I get it. And the minute you get it, everything starts opening up. So, in that middle zone, I think this is the part when you start to get a feel for different parts of the turn too. Because once you're linking turns, now you're thinking about stance. You're thinking about when to switch your lead legs. You're thinking about different terrain choices. You know, terrain choices especially are important because you've probably been on a groomer at that point. You know, let's be honest. You're going to learn how to telemark in bounds, you know, and anybody who tries to take you telemark skiing in the backcountry, like on your first time, it's probably a bad idea. You're not going to get the reps in. You're not going to know the technique and you're not going to understand these things. So I highly suggest, you know, find a little bunny hill, little rope toe, whatever, hike up a hill, learn the technique where you can get the reps in because that clicking moment that we're talking about is only going to happen through doing a bunch of reps and having kind of some space to work with it. But in this middle zone, you're going to start kind of figuring out, you know, when to change things. You're going to start looking at the bumpier terrain. You know, you're going to start looking, you know, at chopped up snow. You're going to start looking at skiing between trees. And you're going to start wondering, and you're going to start going, okay, I know how to link the turns, or I can kind of partially do these pieces. And by changing those things up and starting to focus a little bit more on these different aspects of the technique, that's what's going to start challenging you. And this middle zone's so good for that. You're going to start to feel the pieces that you're going to want to enhance and perfect over time too. And, especially if you're seeing other tele skiers, if you're by yourself, you're probably just going to have to suss it out and figure out what you need to work on. But I think skiing with other individuals, especially if they're Telemark skiers, watching other people is great. Even watching videos of people is great, because you're going to start thinking differently. Oh, I think I could try that here. You're going to start looking at terrain differently. And at this point, like I said, you're hooked. Middle zone, you're hooked. It's now that you're in a cycle of mastery that is going to take you down the road for many, many years. And the middle zone is where this all kind of happens. You start realizing that there is an incredible tool chest and a million things that you're about to learn. But I will also say, for as many people that don't make it through the newbie phase, because it sucks so bad, the middle zone is where you got to stick with it. It is absolutely crucial that in that middle zone, you stick with it. And I'll tell you why people quit in the middle zone. People that only put a little time into telemark skiing are never going to achieve the results they had in their other disciplines if they had a discipline before, like they came from alpine or they came from snowboard. That's why a lot of those folks quit. And I see this all the time. People are like, I tried telemark skiing, but I just can't keep up with my alpine friends. It's just, I can't do it. And I'm thinking to myself yeah, you can. You can keep up with them. Just try harder. Practice. That's it. Put more time into it. You're going to be fine. Because the people I ski with, they shred, man. And I know you can get up to that if that's what you want. I'm not saying you have to keep up with an alpine skier. I'm not saying you have to keep up with a snowboarder. I mean, in all honesty, we shouldn't compare ourselves to other people in general in life. So quit worrying about it on the hill. And if your friends suck that bad that they're hassling you because you're interested in something, there's probably some bigger issues there. But yeah, this is where people start to quit, and it's a direct derivative of not putting in the work again. There is no shortcut to getting better at this. You just have to do it more. And so the other one that's super common is, it's a big winter and there's a lot of powder. And guess what happens? People get into telly, and then all of a sudden it starts nuking outside, and they're thinking, you're like, oh, hey, I saw, you've been telling a bunch, and they'll be like, nah, man, there's so many good powder days. And I'm thinking in my brain, I'm like, and you didn't put on your telemark skis on a powder day? That's my first thought process, right? Because we know, you and I, you out there and me, we know. The first thing is, when it dumps, of course I want to be telemark skiing, because it's going to be deep. It's always deeper as a telemark skier. No ifs, ands, or buts. A 6-inch day to us is like face shots the whole way down. And I'm not even talking about all you low smoker types out there. I'm saying it's just good all around. So you can't, if you're going to get into this and you want it to be good and you really want to know why we do this turn, you got to do it a lot. You can't skip days, It's just like anything. It's like if you want to be a good hiker, but you only sit on your couch all day, like you're going to suck. You're not going to have any endurance, and it's just going to hurt, the less time you put into this, the more it's going to hurt, the more you're going to get bumped back to the greenhorn phase, the newbie phase, and that's it. So that's where a lot of people quit too, is they don't think they can achieve something, whatever it may be, at whatever age, and I think that's where a lot of people they let go and they just don't really want it that bad. But I will tell you that middle zone is primo, again, to start understanding all of these great things that the Telemark turn really has in store for you in all aspects: powder, crud, bumps, trees, hiking, you name it. It's all doable, and it's all doable at a high level, middle level, beginner level. But to kind of finish up the middle zone, Telemark is only great for the non-quitters. So don't be a quitter. Stick with it. As we get into you've made it, and I'm not even saying there's a certain amount of years you have to spend, I was doing the math this morning, and right now I've been a Telemark skier for 27 years. That's all I've done since I was 14 years old. So yeah, I'm passionate. Of course I'm passionate. I'm sure people think I'm kind of a psycho about it. I have Telemark tattooed on my knuckles. I mean, come on. I'm not quitting, I love it too much. And it's these things that I'm talking about. It's these different zones that have made it so I don't want to quit, because you get ownership of this stuff as you start to learn these techniques. And there's kind of this brother and sisterhood, I think, when we see other people out there, and you just know the other person paid into this thing as much as you did, and they've been doing it for a long time, and you just vibe. It doesn't matter. That's why I always say we're a bunch of hippies, punks, and misfits. It has nothing to do, what kind of style you are in this life, but you're just not the quitting type. And you're the type of person that just wants to keep learning. And so once you make it out of this middle zone, if you make it past that, that's when it gets good. It gets even better, because now you're into what I call the mindless zone. And that basically means you're more or less an expert, you're at a high level. And I think the real determining factor is that the turn is now your tool. You possess these tools, and specifically the Telemark turn, but you're using the tool to attack the projects. You're in a mindless zone. You're not thinking about all these little aspects, like in the beginning zone and the middle zone. You're thinking all the time. How do I do this? How do I turn? When do I turn? How do I attack this line? How do I get through the bumps? How do I do this basically without dying? It's there's much more like this survival aspect. And I think by the time you get to this mindless zone, you're now starting to work at the mastery portion of this. Let me not jump ahead. I mean, the mindless zone is where you're seeking out terrain it's going to challenge you in terms of your technical ability and less about the little details of the turn. Okay. The mindless zone is crucial, because then you're just doing it, right? And it's like a lot of things in life again, it's like this mindless zone, you're not worried about all the nitty gritty, like, am I doing this right? You're just in a groove, and you're existing, and you're doing things, and you're reacting to the terrain. You're reacting to the snow quality. You're reacting to the dangers in front of you. There's all these different things that are coming at you on a mountain, And you're not worrying about whether the tools on your tool belt are going to work. They're just going to work because you've put the time in and now they're working for you. And that mindless zone is where you're just at the top and what you're thinking about is the line. You're thinking about how I'm going to go down this terrain, and you're absorbing things at such a fast rate that your reaction time is just on point, because you've more or less in a way, even though skiing's fun, it's kind of like training, right? Like you're training your mind and your body to react in a certain way. And the more reps you do it, the more innate it becomes. It becomes part of you. And again, just like all these other zones are fun for their own reasons, the mindless zone is where it starts getting epic at that point, because you're pretty much looking at every part of the mountain. You're not looking at something and going, I can't get down that, I don't know how to turn, or I don't know how to do this. Again, you got to be in your ability level still. Like, you don't want to go, maybe that's a good thing to bring up too. It's like, if you're getting above your ability level where the technique begins to suffer, you are probably having a realization that for that particular level of telemark skiing, you're probably more in the middle zone and not the mindless zone. And that's okay, because then you're like going back to thinking, can I make turns? I see that all the time. You get on something steep. I mean, hell, I've had that happen to me a bunch of times, over the course of my telemark life cycle, if you will. You get on something super steep and you're like, all right. And you want to drop that first turn like it's hot. You want to drop your knee. You want to get aggressive. But man, it is steep. And you kind of have that little moment where you kind of just throw the P turn in, because you're just not sure, that it's possible to do the technique. And I think those are those moments where the mindless part, it goes away and you realize, hey, this is a zone I got to work on. So that kind of like leads me into my next thing. Once you're in that mindless zone in the majority, like I said, you're going to fluctuate, right? Like, you're not going to be perfect at this thing. That's the best part about it. You're never going to learn everything, and you got a lifetime of skiing to do it. So it's amazing. Once you're in that mindless zone in the majority of the realm of things, I think where you're into now is a zone of mastery. And for me, I feel like this is, especially in the last, 5+ years, I feel like I would like to think that I'm still learning, but I'm more in a phase of kind of mastering these little things. And one of the things that I like to do for me is creating new situations, because what it's allowing me to do from a terrain perspective, it's letting me get into different zones and try different things. Also, creating new situations for me sometimes means going back in time. I've talked about it on here before, but I love moguls. Moguls aren't in a lot of places what they used to be back in the day. They're just not formed the same way. But every once in a while, you're going to find, and like we were up in Pebble Creek in southern Idaho, before the season ended, and so many great bump runs, and there were some good lines, and I was psyched. And there's something about moguls where going back into that kind of a situation, it's almost like going back in time for me when I was in that more middle phase in the early days, where it was teaching me something and I really had to think about it. Whereas now when I'm getting in these lines, now I'm more in the mindless phase. But what it's letting me do is really try to master different aspects of that, like flow, transitions, breathing, really get a lot deeper. I'm not so worried about like the technique, like can I turn around the bumps and stay in that zipper line? But it's more like, how am I controlling my speed and all these little details? And I think that's what the mastery level of this, and why it just, I just get psyched, you know, because there's just so much to think about. So yeah, going back in time, trying different situations like that's great. One of my favorites, if you follow me online at all or follow the Freeheel Life stuff, you're going to know that I am all about skiing vintage gear. And I'll tell you why that is. I think a lot of people, I started, you know, if you've listened to the podcast, I started on, you know, low cuff, lace up leather boots, solo snowfields on 3 pins, you know, and I get it. Telemarkers also, like, we get super nostalgic, you know, and I get it. You start in this old gear and it felt this way, you know, I get it. It's awesome. It's cool. I love history more than anything. Telemark history, it's my jam. I love it to death. However, when I'm talking about this like mastery phase of stuff, there's sort of, of course, there's the vintage history component of skiing on leather. But I'll tell you, the real reason that I started going back and skiing this stuff, and there was, I don't know how, it's probably 5 years ago. I think it was around the time I started the Freeheel Life shop. I did like a little thing on my Instagram called 30 Days of Leather. And basically the first 30 days of the season, I only skied low top leathers and old school skis. And what it started teaching me going back onto that equipment was how it made me see the terrain differently. And to me, it was fascinating because for years I had been in this mindless phase, right? I finally got there and I'm just gunning it all the time. My gear's stable. I'm going fast. I'm ripping through crud. I'm jumping off stuff. I'm, you know, you name it. It was just like, I'm not thinking about Telemark. I'm just a Telemark skier doing it. So when I started that 30 days of leather thing and kind of going back to that vintage gear, it kind of started out like, yeah, let's go ski the old stuff. But then I realized how valuable it was because I started looking at the mountain totally differently because my skis are longer. I'm skiing 200, 210s, 215s. The way that I'm maneuvering through stuff, I'm feeling the ball of my foot in a different way. I'm feeling the twist of the leather boot, the torsional twist when I'm trying to edge. I'm feeling the narrowness of the ski. In some cases, I'm feeling the double camber of the ski. These techniques, not having a high cuff, I can extend my front leg differently. So what it makes you do is slow down at the beginning because you're like, this stuff is flimsy. You know, I don't have the kind of support that I was just in this mindless zone, just charging all the time and stoked. And now I've got to look at things. I got to look at trees differently. I've got to look at bumps differently. I've got to navigate the terrain differently. And I've got to navigate powder differently because now I'm on a skinny ski. I'm underneath the snow. I'm not on top of the snow with a wider ski. I mean, I could go on and on and on. These are the things that leather and old school setups like that really bring out. Is it gives one the opportunity to look at the mountain differently and absolutely dig in to how you maneuver around things. And guess what? When I go back to a modern setup, it's even better. And it's because I think I have spent time looking at detail again. And I'm not just strapping modern gear on and just crushing things in front of me. I'm finessing it. I'm feeling it differently. And so that ball of the foot that I'm feeling in the leather boot, I'm now feeling it in the modern gear. The way that I'm turning, the way that I'm initiating my turns, how I'm going about things gets better when I go back to that. Maybe it's a good thing once you kind of hit this mastery version of stuff and go back to the mindless phase. I feel like you're taking more knowledge with you. You're becoming a more complete telemark skier because you're looking at the mountains differently. So that's why I love the vintage gear, that mastery phase too. I think, you start thinking longer hikes. You start thinking, am I in shape? Can I get places? I mean, let's be honest. I hated hiking. I did not become a telemark skier in the early days so I could hike. I just like the turn. So if you hate the hike, that's cool. I mean, don't let anybody give you a hard time about that. Like I always say, it's a downhill technique. But I think on that quest, like especially where I'm at, I'm in my 40s and a large, my entire adult life I've been a telemark skier. I think you start looking at these other forms of mastery and like, how can you be a better hiker? Like I used to think how good of a kick turn you could do is not really that important. I mean, honestly, I'm not like, let's be honest. I'm not like a super kick turn nerd or anything. And I'm probably don't look very pretty, but I have friends that are really into that. And if you can do a nice kick turn and shave some seconds off, you're just a total badass. So I don't know. These are the things that you can challenge yourself with, and overall, I think what you're probably hearing me say is in the mastery phase, the mastery zone, you're starting to pick out smaller pieces of your game to improve on. You're coming out of a mindless zone and then you're starting to go, I'm going to pick out these little teeny things that I'm going to do. Someone I always really respect is Taylor here, Taylor Johnson at the shop. He'll go out and especially like early season, he'll come in, he'll be like, he'll spend runs and runs doing mono marking where he's not changing his lead leg, and doing little techniques that are going to better him as a skier. And I admire that so much, people that are doing stuff like that, because they're ripping skiers, but then they're just taking one little piece of their game and they're learning how to improve on it. But this is way down the line. You know what I mean? This isn't something you just do right off the bat, And then the last thing I was going to mention before we wrap it up is mastery of gear. And I think this even makes you a even better telemark skier. And I can attest to this because mastery of gear, when I did not get into telemark because of the gear. I did not get in because I want to geek out on grams of weight and all of the stuff and, whatever. I mean, honestly, this is how funny it is. I opened the Freeheel Life telemark shop. Until we opened the shop, I had never mounted my own pair of telemark ski bindings ever. Never mounted a pair of skis. And it has been an incredible journey to be around this much equipment. I didn't grow up with a lot of money, so I didn't have like stacks and stacks of cash to spend on gear. I had whatever I had, most of my early telemark skis were bought from Played Against Sports, and then I got an old pair of whatever Alpine skis, and then I would mount cable bindings on them. And then I had the same boots like forever, just like everyone else out there, But I will say there is something, even if you can't buy a bunch of gear, learning the gear that you have, and it doesn't, you don't have to wait to be at some crazy master level. I think this is, looking back, I wish I would have done this sooner, because understanding how my gear works, how I can fix it on my own in a bad situation in the backcountry or on piste at the resort, understanding how to customize it, like I always talk about with NTN gear, understanding the skis. all I have to say with gear is master it the best you can, understand it. But I will say, don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk to other people that don't do that, because honestly, it just doesn't matter. They're on their own journey. Sometimes I see that with gear people. They get a little too aggro, but I do think it is an incredibly important thing to understand, and it makes the whole thing better. You understand the systems better and the systems that you're working with, and I think that's fantastic. So this was a fun podcast, you guys. At least for me. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to it. It's kind of my breakdown of the life cycle of a Telemark skier. And if you made it this far in the podcast, you're definitely not a quitter. So I appreciate that. And much love to all of you out there. It means a lot to me to have this podcast and to be able to talk to you guys and share my thoughts, and to have incredibly fun guests on, and just be able to talk about telemark skiing, which I'm super passionate about, and I hope you are too. So new for this week, if you want to support the content, there's a new way to do it by making a donation of your choice at paypal.me/freeheellife. Any amount helps, you guys. If you like the podcast, obviously for free on the internet, but any of your support helps. Another way to do that, check out freeheellife.com. That's my shop, and I would love for you guys we've still got some stuff I'm going to be putting on sale this week. We're trying to blow everything out that we can right now, everybody. Cutting the season short was definitely a little tricky. I know that it's tight for everybody out there. I 100% understand that. And any support that you can throw our way is greatly, greatly appreciated. And it'll help us keep going. So check out the articles on telemarkskier.com. There's some new ones up there from this past week. There's more stuff coming out this week. And I would love to hear how I'm doing. If you're liking the podcast while you're sitting at home or whatever you may be doing around the world, you can email me at podcast@freeheellife.com. And thank you for listening. Please take a second to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. That helps us out a ton. And until next week, spread telemark always, my friends.